Who doesn't love a peppy jazz interlude? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this panel, Barriers to Housing for People in Quebec. Our moderator for this session is DWP Toronto Outreach Coordinator Janet Rodriguez. From Laval University comes Professor Marie-Ève Lamontagne, and DWP board member is one of the only hats that Elizabeth Lowe wears, also of Fin Nottingham. This is our only session in French today. So if you are watching and you are a French speaker and you do research, please consider applying en français for our conference next year. We would love that. And I'm going to pass over to you, Janet. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à cette session.
Hello and welcome to this session. And I'd like to say, first of all, that if you cannot understand French, well, French is my third language, and yesterday I had dental surgery. And so today, I would like to, first of all, introduce the panelists, Marie-Ève Lamontagne and Elizabeth Lowe, to introduce themselves briefly to let us know what they're doing in life, as well as their personal and professional life. And I would like to start with Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Well, I will introduce myself briefly. My name is Elizabeth. I'm 33 years old. I have a physical handicap, cerebral palsy, and I am here to represent two organizations. The first one is the organization I work with as a receptionist. We are a organization in Quebec who works with people with disabilities and their caregivers, and to see how they can be eligible both federally and provincially, and we offer them personalized services. We also offer conferences on different programs and measures. And so I work part-time as a receptionist, and I'm also part of the Disability Without Poverty Board. And this is going to be my second or third year, I believe. So I'm passionate about activism, and I'm very happy to be here with you today. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being here. Thank you, Liz. And now, Marie-Ève Lamontagne. We cannot hear you. Oh, that's classic, right? So you don't have to call me doctor. My name is Marie-Ève Lamontagne. By training, I'm an occupational therapist. I studied at Laval University, and when I started studying occupational therapy, I became particularly interested to individuals who have cerebral trauma, and I have been collaborating closely with La Maison Martin et Marthe in Quebec City, as well as Connexion TCC Quebec for 25 years on different areas. And more recently, we really took an in-depth look on the environment of individuals who live with a brain trauma. Otherwise, I'm someone who appreciates the arts. I'm a little disorganized. I'm very creative. And I love working with research and collaborate with others. others. That's what I'm very
Merci
interested in.
bien. Et
Thank you very much.
je voudrais
And
poser une question à tous les
I
deux.
would like to
Et en
ask
première,
both of
on
you
va
some
parler
questions.
en termes
And first of all,
général sur la
we're going to
situation du logement
speak
dans la province de Québec,
in
où
general
j'habite,
on
où
the
vous
housing
habitez,
situation
ou
in the province of
peut-être où
Quebec,
vous faites
where
votre travail.
you
Et
work
après, on
or
va
where
aussi
you
demander des choses
live. And we're also
spécifiquement
going
sur
to
le
look
travail que
at
vous faites. Je
things
voudrais
on the
vous
work that you're doing
demander,
specifically.
Dr.
I would like to
Lamontagne,
ask you,
quels sont
Dr.
les défis
Lamontagne,
actuels
what
en
are
matière
the
de
current
logement
challenges in
accessible
terms of
dans
accessible
votre
housing
province?
in your province?
Puis Elisabeth, là,
Well,
tu peux m'interrompre à tous les
Elizabeth,
moments que tu
you
veux.
can interrupt me
Donc,
at
dans la
any time
province
if
de
you'd like.
Québec, il y a une
So,
grosse
in the
crise
province
de
of Quebec,
logement
there's a
pour
huge housing
commencer de
crisis
tous les types
of
qui existent.
all
Donc,
kinds.
simplement avoir un
And so,
logement,
simply
c'est un
having a
défi,
home
même
is
si
a
on n'a pas
challenge,
d'incapacité
even
cognitive
if
ou
we're
physique.
not
Donc, ça,
physically
c'est un
handicapped
premier
or
élément.
cognitively
Les
handicapped.
logements
So
sont
that's one
excessivement chers.
first
Moi,
observation.
comme personne
Housing
sans
is extremely
incapacité,
expensive.
qui a un
So
travail à
as a
temps plein,
person
j'aurais de la
without a
difficulté
disability who
à
works
aborder, à avoir
full
un
time,
logement
I
maintenant.
would have
Donc,
a
c'est un premier
problem
point.
finding affordable housing myself. So
À ma
that's one first
connaissance,
thing I
les
want to say.
logements
As far as I
adaptés
know,
sont rares.
adapted
Ils sont bien
housing
adaptés.
are very
Effectivement,
rare.
vous avez raison.
Exactly,
Moi,
you're
ce que je
right.
rajouterais aussi, c'est que
So
les
what I'd
listes
like to
d'attente
add is
pour
that
les
the
logements
waiting
des
lists
personnes à mobilité réduite sont
for
très longues.
reduced
Je peux donner
mobility
un des
individuals
exemples
are
à moi qui
very
a été mis
long.
sur
I
une
can
liste
give you an
d'attente
example. I
probablement
put my
adaptée,
name
et puis
on
c'est de
a
7 à
waiting
10 ans.
list for
Les
adapting
listes
housing,
d'attente
and
et
it's between
une
7
des
and 10
grandes,
years.
une des
And
conditions, si on peut dire, ça peut
one of
arriver
the
que ça soit lorsque
conditions,
quelqu'un décède
it can
seulement
happen
qu'on puisse avoir
that a
accès
space opens
au
up when
logement.
somebody
Ou, bon,
dies.
il y a d'autres conditions aussi, mais
There are
bref,
other
effectivement, vous
conditions,
avez
but
vraiment raison.
you're
Marie-Ève,
right,
il y en a
Marie-Ève.
très peu. Puis,
There are
aussi, ce
very
que je
few
remarque, c'est que
people. And
il y
also,
en
what
a,
I've noticed
les logements pour
is
personnes handicapées sont
that
souvent centralisés en bas de
housing,
Des
specifically
fois, on
for
aimerait ça
people
qu'il y en
with
ait, que ça soit un petit peu
disability,
plus réparti aussi
are
au
only
niveau de la
located in one
haute ville.
area,
C'est ça aussi,
in
ben,
the
c'est
lower
faire, comme
Quebec
vous
City
dites, c'est
area.
difficile
So
de
we would
trouver des
like the housing
subventions
to
pour
be in the
ça.
higher
Puis pour
Quebec
les
area. It's
adaptations à
very
domicile
difficult to
aussi, mais ça,
find
on y
subsidies
reviendra plus tard.
as well
Mais bref,
as
c'est juste
funding
le point que je voulais
for
faire. Fait que je vous laisse continuer ce que vous disiez. Je ne l'ai pas coupé là.
to
Non,
adapt
non, je pense que
someone's
ça va être comme
own
ça, là. On
home.
va discuter
Well,
passionnément
I think
pendant
this
un
is
petit
how
bout.
it's going to go. We're
En
going to
fait,
discuss
pour
passionately
préciser,
for a while.
les logements en
And so,
basse-ville, c'est un
in
quartier
the
plus populaire et
lower
plus densément
city in
peuplé.
Quebec City,
Et
it's a
c'est
more
là qu'on va
popular and
retrouver
more
le
densely
plus de
populated
logements
area.
accessibles.
And that's
Mais en
where we can
banlieue, où il
find
y a
the
plus de
most
nature,
number of
par
accessible
exemple,
housing.
où ça
But
pourrait
in
être peut-être
areas
plus
that's
spacieux
surrounded
ou
by
plus facile à
nature,
naviguer,
or there
il y a
might be
beaucoup
more
moins de
space,
logements adaptés.
areas that might be
Donc,
more
les gens
easy to
sont
navigate
obligés de
are
demeurer dans un
very few
secteur
and
parce
far
qu'il n'y a
between.
pas
So
de
people
logement
are sort of
adapté toujours
forced
dans
to
les
live
autres
in one
secteurs.
area because there's
Vous le
no
savez, on a un
housing that
petit
is
corridor le
adapted
long du
in
fleuve
other
Saint-Laurent
areas.
où on a des
So
villes plus
along the St.
peuplées,
Lawrence
Montréal,
River, there are
Québec,
populated
Trois-Rivières, etc.
cities
Mais
like
il y a également
Montreal,
beaucoup de
Trois-Rivières, and Quebec.
villages
But there are
en
also
Gaspésie,
many
sur la côte
villages
nord,
in
en Abitibi,
Gaspé, on the
et
North
il y a
Shore, in
encore
Abitibi
moins
region.
de logements
And
adaptés dans
there are
ces
even
lieux, si
less
on peut le dire comme
adapted
cela.
housing in these
Puis peut-être
more
pour faire un
rural,
point,
farther
Elisabeth
areas.
parle de logements qui
And
sont
to make a
adaptés pour
point,
les gens qui ont des
Elizabeth
incapacités
speaks
physiques,
about
mais il y a
housing
également des gens
adapted
qui
for
ont
people
des
with
troubles
physical
cognitifs, de
disabilities, but there
mémoire,
are
de
also people who
comportement.
have
Et
cognitive
même si on n'a
issues,
pas besoin de
memory
mettre des
issues, or
barres
behavioral
d'appui, on
issues,
a besoin que les
even if
logements
we don't
répondent
need
à certains besoins. Peut-être être
certain
plus
things.
silencieux,
We need some
d'être
environments to be
présenter plus
adapted
de
to certain
rangement
needs,
pour
like
qu'il y ait du lit
being
partout, que le
more
voisinage
quiet,
soit adapté. Et
that
ça,
the
ben, c'est toute
neighborhood
une autre
also be
dimension là,
adapted. So
à
that's
laquelle
a
on devrait faire
whole
attention.
other aspect that we don't often refer to. Yes, what I've also noticed is I spoke about my physical handicap, but I also have a neurological handicap. I have issues with energy. So this means I can only work part-time, which means it's difficult to find housing that accommodates this, but also for home services. In my case, I'm not allowed to have or not eligible to have any of these services because I don't use a wheelchair. Even if I try to prove that my neurological issue is significant and I can only work a few hours a week, and when I'm finished working, I don't have any more energy to do my daily domestic tasks. And it's very difficult to make this, to have this be understood by people who work in these social services. And so it's difficult for a person who doesn't use a wheelchair and has neurological or energy issues to have access to services. And so when a handicap is invisible, it's difficult to prove. And I totally agree with you. And I'd like to say that in terms of the housing situation in Quebec, just like in other regions in Canada, there are many individuals who are homeless. And so traditionally, we associated homeless people, with people who had issues with drug addiction or mental health issues. But now we're noticing that many homeless individuals have mobility issues. They have chronic pain and all kinds of different issues. And so that adds to the fact that the situation is more and more complex and more dire for Quebecers who live with a disability.
Oui. Statistics Canada.
And so Statistics Canada says that the unemployment rate of individuals with disabilities is double than the one for people without a disability. And so this is the question, and I will put that in the chat to for all of you to be able to read this. We know that the level of unemployment and underemployment is higher for people with disabilities. So how can low-income individuals go beyond this obstacle? Living with one's parents, is that a positive element? Are there barriers? What do you think about that? So, Marie-Ève, would you like to go first? No, you have a lot more expertise than I do on the topic. Well, I just wanted to make sure that you had the time to speak, because I sort of like spoke over you before. And so I can speak about my own personal situation. So it's not necessarily applicable to everyone in Quebec, but my situation is I've had a partner. We've been together for 15 years. My partner is also disabled, but he doesn't have any energy issues at all. And so he is able to work full time. Now, the problem that I'm speaking about is that if I want to live with my partner, it's not possible, because otherwise I will lose most of my benefits. And so here we're talking about the social solidarity program. And so this is what I'm speaking about, is that we are in 2025, and once again, it's the partner's revenue and the fact that the partner earns too much money for us to live together. And so for me, this is so inconsistent. And so now I'm 33 years old and I work at home because if I live with my mother, ironically, they're not cutting my benefits. So this is the sauce that I wanted to submit to you, that it's completely illogical. And so not being able to live with one's partner takes away our dignity and freedom. Who should we live with, and why should we have to justify this with someone who doesn't know us personally, who doesn't know our story, and someone in the government decides, well, you're going to lose most of your benefit, or you'll lose 30 to 40% of your benefits if I live with my partner. It's quite significant. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention. And it's so ironic because we're encouraged to live alone in adapted housing. We're given a premium if we live alone. But when we live with a partner, we lose. And so that's what I wanted to mention to you, is that's certainly not helping the unemployment rate. And so I have the chance of being able to work part-time, but it's if it's detrimental to me, well, it's quite helpful financially speaking. I'm extremely grateful. I love my job, but it's very complicated to have to explain all of this to the government. And so our lives were encouraged to be self-reliant, and when we try to be self-reliant, leave the family home and live with our partner, we're punished. And so this is something I thought was important to mention. Otherwise, of course, in my own life, I hope there will be even more jobs created with the federal government, part-time jobs, because what we have at the moment is almost exclusively full-time. And so these are the two aspects I wanted to share. It's not because we work part-time that there aren't great things to contribute to society. And so disabilities wears many faces, whether it's visible or invisible. They're all valid. They exist. So it would be great if it was even more recognized. That's what I wanted to say. So you spoke about a lot of things that are problematic, like, for instance, living on one's own. Certain people can live alone, but there are other individuals who can't. They do need help every day, during the day, to do a lot of things. Perhaps our partner could do it, and so if not, there's an additional cost in order to hire someone that we don't know, and it's a contradiction, right, Marie-Ève? Well, in fact, in the research we conducted with Connection TCC, we looked at where people who had a brain injury or brain trauma lived. When one has that, we can have loss of memory and secondary impacts. And so we saw that the issues were not necessarily in terms of adapting the home, whether to have a handlebar or no, but it was rather the human environment, in the environment and the surrounding environment that could work as a security net. When there are people who don't know what the condition is, take out the garbage from time to time, that can check in on the person to see if the person isn't doing well, okay, we can do something. Or when that doesn't work in terms of the human environment, it's a lot more difficult for the person to remain in that environment. Now, when it comes to brain injuries, it happens all of a sudden, contrary to what Elizabeth shared, very often with young adults, because many of them are in car accidents. So a 33-year-old young adult or 23-year-old young adult who finished schooling is a victim of an accident, and all of a sudden he or she cannot accomplish their life's dream. It's a huge shock. The parents perhaps don't have the space or the energy to support their child in the long term. And it's not the person's choice either. So when Elizabeth spoke about dignity and about respecting people's right to choose who they want to live with, well, it's very critical. But the human environment will always remain the most important factor for someone who has a brain trauma.
C'est très important.
Yes, it's very important.
La prochaine question,
The next
je vais
question,
la mettre ici.
which I will put here.
Certaines personnes ont le
Is
moyen
certain
de payer
individuals
un
have the
loyer
means
plus
to
élevé,
pay
mais
a
certaines
higher
situations
rent,
nécessitent
but
des
certain situations
aménagements
require
spécifiques, comme l'absence de
specific
tapis,
support,
au sous-sol,
like
l'utilisation d'un
not
arbre
having any
lumineux
carpet or
plutôt que
using
sonore. Connaissez-vous les
flashing
autres
alarms
besoins
rather than
particulièrement en matière de logement qui
sound
devraient,
alarms?
qui
So do you
devraient
know
être ces
other
adaptations?
specific needs that would need to be offered in adapted housing? And who should finance them? So I'm going to let you answer. Well, in fact, I'd like to say that based on what the results of our study was, and another study we did on invisible disabilities. People are familiar with bathtub bars or not having stairs or elevated areas, but there are other physical characteristics that will have people be very uncomfortable in a home. For people with head injury or head trauma, it can bother them. It could impact their level of tiredness. Lighting, if there is not enough lighting or if there's too much lighting, it could be aggressive. People who have physical disabilities will often live in low-cost housing, and very often, this is one of our participants who reminded us of that, ventilation isn't very good. So there are different odors that invade our spaces, and since some individuals are hypersensitive, they live with this microaggression on a constant basis every day. And so when the paying organizations, for instance, in Quebec, we have the auto insurance. These are not recognized physical limitations. So in order to explain to a paying organization that they should need to improve ventilation or sound so that the person can remain living in that area, it's just impossible.
Ce sont spécialement
And
difficiles
so
de
what's
les
especially
identifier quand la
difficult to
personne situation de
identify
handicap
is when
vit avec
people
un
with disability
type de
live with a
maladie
kind of
qui n'est pas visible. Et il faut le croire,
invisible issue,
certaines personnes,
and we need
dépendant
to
dans leur
believe that
identification, peut-être
certain
n'ont pas
individuals
beaucoup de support.
may not have a
Je
lot
parle
of
par
support.
exemple les personnes noires,
So I'm
africaines
speaking
ou
about
même de Première Nation.
Black or
Ça,
indigenous
c'est une
peoples.
autre cap des barrières.
So
Please.
that's another barrier, right?
OK. Ben, Tantôt, tu sais, ce que Marie-Ève disait,
Well,
c'est très
based
vrai
on what
aussi, c'est qu'il
Marie-Ève
s'agit pas
mentioned,
juste de
there's
juste
not
prendre des bars de vin.
only
Bon, je vais parler de mon cas à moi.
just a
Moi,
case
si
of
je veux prendre mon bain physiquement,
bathtub
j'ai besoin de
handlebars.
une
Well,
barre
if I
de
want to
vin. J'ai
take a
aussi
bath,
besoin
I do
d'une
need
chaise
that bar.
de douche
I
spéciale
also
parce que
need
si je
a
suis pas
special
assise, moi, je peux
chair
pas
to
prendre ma
take a
douche
shower
debout. J'ai
because
pas
if
assez
I'm not
d'équilibre pour
sitting
ça.
down, I
Puis
can't take
aussi,
my shower
les
standing
portes
up because I
automatiques
don't
dans
have
les
enough
appartements.
balance.
Parce qu'en ce moment, il manque
Automatic
tellement
doors in
d'argent pour
apartment
adapter les
buildings.
domiciles
And so
que les
there's such
gens
a lack
se
of money
ramassent
to
dans
adapt
les gens qui
housing
sont capables se
at the
ramassent
moment
aussi
so that people
dans les logements
end
réguliers
up
et ont
finding
besoin que ça
themselves in
soit adapté.
regular
Mais comme il n'y a pas assez
housing,
d'argent non
but
plus
they need it to be
tu sais,
adapted.
pour
But
permettre
since
ces
there's not enough
adaptations-là,
money
il y
to
a moins de
allow these
subventions
types of
disponibles, ben, ça peut être
adaptations,
long.
there's a
Si vous
lot
savez
less
quelqu'un qui a
subsidies
attendu 4
available.
ans
Well,
avant
you have to
d'installer une
wait.
porte,
I know of someone who waited 4
un
years
bouton,
before she
un
could
bouton
have
poussoir, en fait, pour accéder
a
à son
push
logement. Ça lui a pris
button
4 ans
to
avant d'avoir
access
ça.
her home.
Puis c'était la même
It
chose
took
pour les
4
seuils de
years.
porte.
And
Fait
it
que,
was
tu
the
sais,
same thing
ça
for
rend notre vie
door
vraiment beaucoup plus
thresholds.
compliquée.
And so it makes our
Tous ces petits
lives a
détails-là.
lot
Puis
more
je pense, entre
complicated.
autres, à
And so,
moi,
among
j'ai
other
mon bureau
things, I'm
que
thinking
j'ai fait
about the
adapter, mon
fact
bureau
that
de
I
travail, puis je vois
had
vraiment une
my
différence sur mes
office
douleurs
at
chroniques.
home
En
adapted,
ce
and I
moment,
can
mes
see a
douleurs, je les
real
vois pas,
difference
mais
on my
avec la
chronic
paralysie
pain
cérébrale,
because
j'ai
with cerebral
des douleurs
palsy, my
persistantes, moi,
pain
au
is
niveau
invisible, but I
cervical, j'ai de
do have
l'arthrose beaucoup.
persistent
Fait que le fait d'avoir un
pain. I
fauteuil
have
qui est vraiment
arthritis.
fait pour moi,
And
pour
the
mon
fact that I
dos,
have a
d'avoir un
chair that's
repose-pied, c'est toutes
adapted
des
to
petites
me,
choses
to my
qu'on
back, and to
pense
have
pas
a
de nommer. Je suis
footrest
tellement
are all
habituée de les
things that we
avoir
don't
que
think about.
j'oublie de les
I'm
nommer.
so used
Fait
to
que
having them that I
c'est bien
forget to
de
mention
le
them.
préciser.
So
C'est
it's
ça.
a good thing to
Mais
mention that.
la partie
But when it
fatigabilité, ben ça est
comes
difficile à
to
chiffrer dans
the part
tu
where
sais, à
I get
savoir qui devrait
tired,
nous
well,
aider
that's
pour ça, le
very
niveau
difficult to
fatigabilité, mais
know who
c'est
can
non
support
négligeable.
us
Tu sais,
with that.
Marie-Ève, tantôt, vous
But
parliez
being
du son,
tired is not
de choses comme ça.
negligible because,
Moi, c'est d'autres choses. Tu sais, moi, c'est
you
si
know,
quelqu'un vient
for
m'aider à
me,
faire
if
une
someone
préparation
comes
de
to
repas,
help
puis
me
que
prepare
subitement,
meals and that
ce
suddenly
service-là, il vient pas
this
pendant une
service
semaine pour une
doesn't
raison ou
come
pour une
for
autre,
a week
ben
for
là,
one
moi,
reason or
je
another,
deviens comme
well, then
dépendante parce que il faut
I'm
que je
very
travaille en même temps, que
dependent
je fasse
because I
ma
have
vie.
to
Fait que si j'ai
work,
pas
I
ça,
have to earn
j'ai
a
pas assez
living.
d'énergie
And so
pour,
if I don't
tu
have
sais,
that,
subvenir
then I
à
don't
faire
have
le
enough
repas, nettoyer
energy to be
l'appartement,
able
puis
to
travailler.
prepare
Fait que
my
c'est beaucoup
meals,
des choix, là.
clean the apartment, and
Tu sais, c'est
work. And
compliqué
so we have to make
compliqué à
choices.
expliquer parce que c'est pas
So
un
it's
appareil
very difficult to
médical
explain
qu'on a
because
besoin
I
pour
don't need a
venir en aide
medical
pour pallier à notre
apparatus
handicap.
or
C'est ce
device
que Janet
to
disait
help
aussi
me
tout à
with
l'heure. On
my
a besoin de
disability.
quelqu'un qui nous
That's
croit.
what Janet was saying earlier. We
Aujourd'hui,
need to have
quand,
people who
quand
believe
on
in
vit
us.
ces choses-là, puis comme ça se
When
voit
we
pas,
tell them
qu'on
that we're
juste moi, je suis
experiencing
capable
these
de
things
m'exprimer
and we can't see
aisément, ben
this.
ça paraît pas. Puis des fois, on
Okay,
se fait dire qu'on est
sometimes
paresseux ou
we're
quelque chose
told
comme
that
ça.
we're
Parce
lazy,
qu'on peut pas
etc.,
faire la
because
cuisine
we
ou parce
can't
que si
cook
on n'est
our
pas
own
capable de
meals
nettoyer
and we're not
l'appartement, on
able
se fait
to
dire, ben
work our
voyons, pourtant
apartment.
vous avez l'air c'est totalement correct, là.
Well,
Fait que
you
je
looked
pense que
fine.
peut-être
So
Marie-Ève vous me
maybe
corrigerez, mais
Marie-Ève,
ça a un
maybe
lien
correct me if
aussi
I'm
avec
wrong,
les personnes
it
qui
has a
vivent vite parce
relationship
que ça
with
se voit
the,
pas
but
nécessairement eux non plus, là.
it's not something
Donc,
you can really see.
En fait, ça se
Well,
voit pas.
in fact,
Tu as
you
tout à
can't
fait
see it.
raison,
You're quite
Elisabeth.
right,
Puis
Elizabeth.
c'est beaucoup plus
And it's a lot
handicapant
more
que on pourrait
debilitating
croire.
than we could
Par exemple, une
believe.
personne qui a
For instance, a
un
person
traumatisme
who
crânien,
has a head,
si
suffers from
elle
a head
sort
injury,
à ses
if the
courses
person
le
goes out to
matin
run
pour
errands in the
préparer un
morning to
repas,
prepare a
elle ne sera
meal,
pas capable
well,
de
the person might not
préparer
be
le
able to
repas par la
prepare the
suite.
meal afterwards.
Donc,
So
c'est un petit peu, c'est toujours une
that's
gymnastique
always
pour
kind of
essayer de voir
you have to
comment
balance
on
this. You
va
have to see
investir le peu
where
d'énergie
you'll
que l'on a.
invest the little energy you
Considérant que
have,
les personnes
considering
souvent
that people
qui
oftentimes
sont en situation de handicap, c'est
who
pas celles qui
are
ont les plus grands
living with a
revenus.
disability
Les
are not the ones who
habitations
have the
dans lesquelles elles sont,
greatest
c'est pas
income.
des
The
habitations qui
housing where
sont
they are, where they
optimales
live, are
au
not
point de vue de
optimum
tout ce qu'on peut
in terms of
faire pour
all you can do
le préparer,
to
l'entretenir, le
prepare,
gérer. Donc,
to
ce sont
manage
pas
it, to
habitations qui sont les
maintain
plus
it, to clean it. So these
faciles
are
à
not
avoir.
the easiest
Donc, il y a des
places
défis
to
de
live in. So
plus,
it's
là,
one more
fardeau de
challenge,
plus pour les
one more
personnes qui ont
burden
des
for
incapacités.
people with
Oui,
living with with a disability. Yes, indeed, I would say the choice notion as well. You know, the person you said as an example who goes run an errand and then he can't cook a meal. It's exactly exactly the same thing I'm going through. Okay, I have to tell myself, okay, what choice I'm making today? What am I doing? So, am I taking a shower? Do I decide that I want to go work? So these are choices, constant choices. You have to juggle with the decisions like that. I don't know if you know the theory of the spoon theory, Mariette. Someone talked about this to me, told me this. I mean, you use a specific spoon name per day to do your perform your activities. I don't know. You have 20 spoons in a day. So it's up to the disabled person to divide the number of spoons the person will need to perform each activity. If you need 4 spoons to take a shower or to go run some errands, and at the end of the day, well, after a day, the person will have used 18 spoons just to clean up the apartment or just to go grocery shopping. The weekend happens and there's no social life possible, and the person, well, just for work, it took 8 spoons. Yeah. It's a very nice image. That issue brings me back to one of our participants has said that really struck us. In our study, we were asking people, did you have a choice for your apartment or your housing? Everybody said yes. So we were surprised because even without a disability, you don't have so much choice, right? So we held focus groups and we questioned people. The person said, yeah, I had the choice to say yes or no, but I only had one option. There was no other. It's a false choice in many cases. So the choice to stay in some apartment or in one apartment more than another, maybe you just don't have the energy to change, to move. Maybe financially speaking, you can't change. So there's kind of a voluntary, okay, I'm going to stay there. For most of people, there's no lock on the door. You can stay there or not, but for most people, there aren't that many options. That's a false choice, right? The restriction. Not of a lot of accessible housing, not a lot of choices. I will ask you a final question, and afterwards, I will ask some questions which came from our audience. So, for people who want to, for people who have questions, participants must put their mouse on the name of the person. For instance, okay, I will select Janet, and to send the question, you have to send them to me, and I will transmit them. Or if you have limitations in terms of mobility for that type of thing, you can find the icon that allows you to raise your hand, and we can then turn on your microphone for you to speak. So the question I have is, do you believe that who do you believe has the greater responsibility, the city or the transportation to go to work, or the province that has a greater budget to build accessible housing with the consultation of people living with a disability, or the federal government who has the greatest budget? Go ahead. Well, I believe that shouldn't be under a management government or level. We are a society. We are in a group. We are Canadians, but we are also Quebecers, citizens of the city of Quebec. So if we say, for instance, that it should be just the federal government who should get involved. It means that it's not other people's responsibility or other governments. So I think it's a collective responsibility. It's for everyone to think about these issues. Let me give you an example. In Quebec, we have a group, Trudel Group, which builds a lot of apartment buildings, towers. Just they're building 200 to 300 of those. And that group, without any obligations or regulations or legislations, they always foresee a portion of apartments that are affordable and accessible within their apartment building. So they do it. I would say they do it because socially they reckon that it's a need, but it should be part of our values. It should be part of the DNA of everyone. And we could even consider 1 person out of 5 has some kind of disability. We could consider that we are all missing a hand and to act accordingly instead of saying, okay, it's up to the government to do it.
J'imagine qu'elle a dit t'as dit mon nom, Janet. Je t'ai pas entendu, mais
You said my name, Janet, but I read on your lips. I didn't hear, but yeah. In fact, I agree with Marie-Ève. If it's the government's responsibility, it gets complicated because you have to explain our limitations, and sometimes people at the government have other stuff to do. They don't always have time to hear, how should I say, the requests of all people, all disabled. So it becomes very complicated because you have to put people in some categories. I don't know how to explain. Maybe I'm not very clear, I think, but I just think it's a lot of responsibilities to be given to the government, and they don't always have time to do so. And for us citizens, we are in the best of position to talk about our stuff. So if we are, linking ourselves to other organizations, like community organizations, it could help. Like I'm thinking about other organizations I've worked with in the past. The more you're supported by some such places like that, such organizations, the more it can help. I don't know what you think about that, Marie-Ève, to get some funding elsewhere. Well, as a matter of fact, in a research we have done, it was very kind of funny. We worked with the big organizations. I said, why? We said, why aren't you putting forward universal accessibility principles? People said, well, I'm not in charge of that. It should be the other person there. And according to them, they were understanding universal accessibility for a person that has been amputated of 4 limbs or in a wheelchair, electrical wheelchair. They were not perceiving this as their role. They were not seeing that there were a lot of other people than just this very specific category that had needs. So from the moment we brought them to think about, the fact that a disability is also my neighbor who is autistic. It's also myself when I hurt my knee, or it's also, when I'm unable to speak a language. So when we made them understand that there was a lot more than what they thought, and that they could play a role, either, for instance, when they were organizing an event, just to have a couple of places for accessible places to help people who don't have a big reading capacity. So it made the responsibility not fall on one person or one government to perform all the changes, but rather everyone who had one small role each to play. So that avoids the fact that if the person or the government changes, for instance, if the government changes, this file would just fall between the cracks. It's totally true. Oh, you're so well spoken. It's so clear. It's easy to understand you. So it's really helpful. I've done some stuff for accessibility in my past, so that's what we noticed. We kind of have to need to have some committees with people with different disabilities who are sitting in places like, for instance, I don't know, a construction field. I don't know. The next place they will be building, is it a library or whatever it is? Disabled committee with disabled people, there's a committee beforehand, before the construction, so that, I mean, then we can start talking with people, with architects, and we could explain our needs, so that could help. It's just not too obvious to do that, to be able to talk, but that's a suggestion we had made, to be involved earlier beforehand in the process, in the design. Yeah, I believe that for the tramway in Quebec, there's the Capital Transit Authority. As of the beginning of the project, they involved a disabled people committee to make sure that there's room enough that would be accessible and it would be acceptable as well. So there's hope, I believe. Yeah, that's great. It's always cool to hear. It's a nice beginning. Just, we shouldn't give up. Well, thank you to the both of you. There are questions that were brought forward by the audience. Now, Brigitte wants to ask a question. Maybe we can we can give the floor to Brigitte.
Oui, bonjour tout le monde.
Hi, everyone.
Bonjour.
Hi. So I really have a question that's a big concern of mine. I'm Brigitte, I'm in Montreal. I've always been there in the meetings for handicap without poverty. I'm a mother of two. In 2021, I had health problems with children. It was difficult. But in 2018, I found a training online that allowed me to have a diploma and 911 operator. So during I was looking for a job. I found a job at the City of Montreal. I was working from home. It was teleworking for me. Okay. Brigitte, please, if you could just speak a bit more slowly, because sign interpreters. Okay, I had not noticed. In 2021, I found a job at the City of Montreal that allowed me to work from home because it was written on the job posting, teleworking. I've been working there for 4 years. Now, the employer want me to go at the office 2 days a week. Well, the doctor says I suffer from a tendinitis, a chronic one, and transfers from the wheelchair have caused this. So the doctor recommended telework because I could not work on site. So now, at this moment, I'm on a disabled because the employer forces me to go 1 day a week. The union, no one can defend me. I'm alone. So it's so difficult. I don't know what to do anymore. So we see this going back to the office for a lot of people. A lot of people can do it, but not everyone. And if Marie-Ève or Elisabeth, you can maybe say something about this. It would give ideas to Brigitte. Thank you, Brigitte.
Est-ce que tu y vas, Elisabeth?
Do you go? You want to go, Elisabeth? Brigitte, what I'm thinking, as I'm a receptionist in my work, I could take your contact information if you want to put them in the chat box. Maybe, Janet, if ever I don't have time to note them down, maybe you can send them to me afterwards. It would be great, because maybe we could help you at Finatonum, where I work, for financial matters. Maybe we would be able to prove your disability situation, or maybe we could help you find some tax credits. I can't, I'm just a receptionist, so I cannot really help at this point, but I will take your contact information and I'll look with my colleagues. I'll look it up and we'll see if there's someone who can support you for you to have at least a proof of your disability. That's what I'm thinking about, the disability tax credit. So I could take your contact information and then I would let my colleagues at Vietnam to be able to assess you, evaluate you, and then we could help you. That's the only thing I could offer in my work.
Merci, Elisabeth.
Thank you, Elisabeth. That's a service that can be provided to you. Now, I have another question, and I will put the question in the chat box. It's in English, but also in French. What recommendations your research has made, and could you tell us where we can find your research? This question is for Maria. Yes, absolutely. So the research is available. I'm looking as I'm speaking on the Connection PCC's website. I'm going to put you the link. Okay, the link in the chat box. Our research shows that there's a lot of people who have have a disability, who are unstable in their environment because of their incapacities. So they will be more impulsive because they have a hard time to get organized or other. So these people are going through residential instability, which is however, these are not bathtub bars or door thresholds that will settle this issue. It's human help. So we call it some technical resources, human ones, to help the person to regulate themselves, to organize their time for the grocery shopping. Doesn't happen the same day as cooking, and we need to have surroundings, people around you that are aware of the limitations of the person, and that they will try to adapt some of their activities. For instance, not to be sending children to just shout under that specific window at 9 a.m. in the morning. So there's a lot of examples of things we could do. And that's as important, if not more, than a physical adaptation. So when we talk about adapted housing, let's think social and human environment that is adapted, not only a support bar. Like a occupational therapist, it would be my first recommendation.
Hello, bonjour.
Hi.
Je parle en anglais. I'll speak in English if that's okay.
We don't mind.
Okay. I understand French and can speak French, but not as fluent as everybody. I live in BC, but I'm Mi'kmaq and Haida, so I'm First Nations, Autochtone. I wanted to ask a question because I've heard you guys talk a lot about housing and about poverty, and I haven't heard a mention about what that looks like in an intersectional space. So looking at lived experience with race and disability and poverty. So my question is, what kind of information or what kind of research has been done around poverty with First Nations people on reserve for housing? Oftentimes, we see a lot of our family members are raised and kept at home instead of living independently because there isn't housing options. And when we look at poverty rates, the rates are so much higher for First Nations people, especially living on reserve. When we look at Statistics Canada, I know before in 2016 census, they said there are people, Indigenous children, 0 to 14, all across Canada. It's like 50%. Some reserves, it's up to 90% unemployment rate and poverty rate for children. So my question is, what kind of research, what kind of things have been looked at from Disability Without Poverty and with the people that are here to that lived experience? Ça fait sens?
Does it make sense?
Est-ce que vous voulez que je traduise la question?
Do you want me to translate the question, the answer in French or?
Donc, Sylvia
Okay.
vient d'une Première
So
Nation
Sylvia is
et
from is
en
First
essence,
Nations. So
elle fait remarquer
essentially,
que
she
sur les
was
réserves
saying that on a
il y a
reserve,
beaucoup de
Indigenous
gens qui vivent
reserve,
avec des
a lot of people
moyens
live
probablement
with
que dans la population en
you know,
général, il y a des
lesser
incapacités.
financial means
Donc,
than
elle voudrait
other as well,
savoir
and also
quelle,
live with some disabilities or
quelle
incapacities. So she wants to
recherche
know
a
what
été
kind of
faite,
research
quelle
has been done,
évidence, quelle
or what
réflexion
kind of
on
reflection
a
or
par
evidence we
rapport aux
have
personnes
with
qui
respect
vivent
to
avec des
people
incapacités dans les
living with some
réserves
incapacities,
de Première Nation.
for
I am
First Nations
translating,
people living on reserve.
Sylvia?
Did I translate it correctly, Sylvia?
Moi, je pourrais peut-être
So I
répondre à ça
might
de deux
answer
points de
to
vue.
that from two
I grew
different
in a
points
mining
of view.
town, so in Sept-Îles, very close to les personnes montagnaises. So I appreciate that there's a lot of poverty dans les réserves. Donc, il y a vraiment beaucoup de pauvreté
There is
dans
a
les
lot of
réserves.
poverty on
Et
reserves
l'habitation
and
pour les
housing
personnes qui ont des
for
incapacités,
people
les personnes des
who
Premières
have
Nations qui
First Nations
demeurent dans les
people with
réserves.
incapacities or
C'est
disabilities who
encore plus
live on reserve. It's
problématique
even more of a
parce
problem
que
because
on a aussi le conseil de banque.
there's also the band
En même temps,
council,
on doit
which is
faire
in charge
adapter.
of
Donc,
housing
on
that
ajoute
have to
un
be
niveau de
houses that have to be adapted. So
supérieur.
there's an additional
Par
complexity
ailleurs,
level added.
on a dans notre recherche sur
Also,
les
through our
personnes
research
post-traumatismes crâniens,
on
on a pu
people living with
travailler
head
avec 2 ou
injuries,
3
we were able
personnes
to work
de
with
Première
2 to
Nation
3
qui
First
avaient
Nations
eu un
people
traumatisme crânien
who
et qui demeuraient
live
sur
with
les
the head
réserves.
trauma and who live on reserve.
L'habitation physique était
Physical
très
housing was
difficile,
very difficult
retrouver
to
une
just
place où aller
find a
vivre parce
place
que sur
where you
les
can go
réserves, il y a
live
moins
because on
d'options. Donc,
reserves
nécessairement,
there's
c'était
are
très
less
difficile.
options. So that was
Par
very
contre,
difficult. However,
comparable, c'est
what
que la
we do
communauté pour
observe
ces
is that the
personnes-là,
community
elle
for these
était
people
beaucoup plus
was
présente,
really present,
beaucoup plus supportante qu'elle pouvait
more
l'être pour les personnes qui
supportive
ne sont
than
pas
they
des
could
Premières
be for
Nations.
people who are not
Donc,
First Nations.
on avait
So
cet avantage-là.
we had,
Oui.
we saw that
Merci,
advantage.
merci pour toutes les questions.
Thank you for all the
Nous
questions.
devons couper l'émission, mais après, et cette discussion
We
sera
will
publiée
finish and this discussion will be published
en YouTube.
on YouTube.
J'aimerais bien, Cynthia,
And I would
rester en
like,
contact
Symbia,
parce que
I would like to remain in
nous
contact with you
parlons de
because
notre
we are
expérience
talking about
et
our
nous
own
voulons bien
experience. We
écouter
want to
l'expérience
listen
des
to
voix propres des personnes qui
the
sont
experiences
First
of
Nations
people who are
Inuit Métis.
living in
Merci pour
First
les
Nations
questions.
Inuit Métis.
Merci à
Thank you
tous.
for the questions. Thank you
Merci
to
pour les
everyone.
interprètes
Thank you
aussi.
for the interpreters
Et
as well.
restez pour
And
le
please
reste
stay for the
de
rest
cette
of this
symposium et à la
symposium.
prochaine.
And we'll see you next time.